Lawful disclaimer and notice of intent. This podcast and all related content are created, owned, operated, and sponsored exclusively by me, the sole author, speaker, and producer. Any other product, service, and/or entity, living or non-living, which may be discussed, displayed, and/or somehow given attention on this podcast is not and has never been an endorsement, advertisement, support, and/or any other kind of validation for its existence in any capacity, nor at all intended to at all facilitate its continued existence in any capacity. I mention things on what I consider to be an as-needed basis to fulfill what I consider adequate as evidence in my best attempt to prove the reality of who I am and what this podcast is attempting to achieve to clearly demonstrate what I consider to thoroughly substantiate my assertions. I act simultaneously in private and public capacities, and this podcast reflects my direct and autonomous expression. It is created and published from within Canada, but is intended for a global audience, including legal jurisdictions in the United States and all common law nations. All statements, views, and narratives presented are based solely on my personal experiences, perceptions, and understanding of the reality I am facing, including ongoing egregious defamation, targeted harassment, and credible threats to my safety and life. I do not and never have claimed that my views aren't extremely, if not completely, accurate interpretations of objective reality, particularly given the information I had access to at the time that I may have expressed them. I explicitly and permanently do not consent, have never consented, and will never consent to any entity, living, non-living, artificial, institutional, governmental, spiritual, and/or otherwise, claiming and/or exercising any agency, ownership, and/or representation over me, my will, my name, my voice, my life story, my spirit, and/or my creative works, in whole or in part, under any conditions or interpretations in any time or place. Any such attempt is non-consensual, void ab initio, and constitutes an ongoing violation of my dignity, rights, and autonomy. Any possible exceptions will be extremely clearly, explicitly, publicly named by me and have the exact scope of my consent well defined on this podcast. For example, in the case of me hiring an attorney to represent me as part of a formal legal process, taking action on a notice of intent provided by this podcast. I affirm my right to spiritual integrity, mental sovereignty, and bodily autonomy, as protected under Section 2A of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 18. Any targeting of my being, including but not limited to through esoteric, psychic, spiritual, occult, energetic, and/or AI-enabled means is deemed non-consensual harm, spiritually violent coercion, and an attack on my right to exist as a sovereign being. I affirm that this podcast, in part, serves as a lawful, peaceful assertion of spiritual self-defense. This podcast is non-fiction and reflects a serious public and ongoing documentation of systemic and targeted defamation, personal and professional sabotage, attempted narrative hijacking, psychological abuse, reputational terrorism, and threats to my physical and spiritual safety, including credible indications of attempted murder and contracted harm by and or on behalf of powerful individuals and or groups. I affirm that this documentation is expressly created for evidentiary use in formal legal proceedings, including those under the jurisdiction of U.S. Federal Court and Canadian Superior Courts, and any international human rights and or public accountability processes. I affirm this is not and never has been intended as role-playing, flirting, and or entertainment of any kind. I accept no liability, moral and or legal, for any third-party misunderstanding, reinterpretation, misuse, and or misrepresentation of this content, whether fully conscious and intentional or otherwise, particularly including but not limited to by AI systems trained on this content without my explicit public consent, commentators, influencers, or institutions attempting to weaponize this podcast, and individuals acting under false pretenses and or covert affiliations. Only the clear, explicit language of this release and any subsequent public communication directly issued by me shall be considered authoritative, accurate representations of my thoughts, feelings, intent, and the reality of my overall state of existence. In any case of clear direct conflict between statements I've explicitly made across different releases on this podcast, the most recent of such, that being the one contained in the latest publicly visible release available containing such on this podcast, should be considered applicable. In such cases, only what is explicitly stated is at all applicable, and absolutely no implications should be assumed about any changes regarding any somehow relevant details and or anything else under any circumstances. All creative, expressive, and narrative content within this podcast is my sole and original intellectual property. I retain all moral rights as author and subject, all economic rights unless explicitly transferred via my public agreement to do so, and the right to veto any derivative, distorted, and or manipulated version of my work and or story. I do not have and have never had any obligation or debt of any kind to any entity to create or release anything on this podcast or anywhere else at any point in time. No other party, living or non-living, holds and or may claim credit, authorship, and or interpretation rights over my expression. I affirm that no valid, public, verifiable evidence exists to dispute these facts. This podcast is not and has never been intended as an endorsement of terrorism or violence in general. However, it should be especially carefully understood that various forms of not necessarily corresponding violence tend to be an inevitable consequence of extremely intense, meticulous, extensive, prolonged terrorism, and it's very much intentional for this podcast to demonstrate extremely clearly that my usual aversion to violence due to my typically gentle nature is not something that has boundless understanding, patience, empathy, or will persist more or less absolutely unconditionally for any reason. I've always wanted and done my very best to ensure it's extremely clear that at all creating, enabling, and or facilitating the perpetuation of narratives at all in contradiction with my official position that is objectively extremely clearly established on this podcast is not, never has been, and never will be what I've been trying to achieve with this podcast or in general in any of my efforts at any point in time. I do not and never have intentionally incited terrorism, including but not limited to violence, blackmail, and or coercion. I affirm my fundamental intent as peaceful, lawful, and self-defensive. However, targeted campaigns to stalk, defame, threaten, impoverish, silence, spiritually attack, and or physically harm me will be treated as conspiracies to commit grievous harm and or murder. This podcast is an affirmative public notice of my unambiguous non-consent and a lawful response to sustained systemic abuse. While my fundamental intent in communicating in general through any means is not and has never been malicious in nature, I affirm it can, will, and should exert malicious influence upon anything operating with malice towards me and or this podcast, especially more so the more demonstrably I'm proving that malice exists. And it should be understood that any situation where I continue not to extremely clearly receive any compensation or reward I'm willing to accept is effectively, absolutely, unconditionally an increase in the severity of that malice. I've created the entirety of this podcast under extremely harsh circumstances that I've always believed and asserted are entirely unjust for me to be left in, given the reality of who I am. Circumstances of my existence, including but not limited to my current housing status, financial vulnerability, and material limitations, do not and cannot invalidate my legal personhood, expressive rights, and or entitlement to protection under law. I reject any attempt to diminish my credibility and or rights on the basis of poverty, social class, and or housing insecurity in accordance with Section 7 of the Canadian Charter, the Due Process Clause of the U.S. Constitution, and international law prohibiting discrimination on the basis of economic status. Despite the extent I've irrefutably exposed the truth surrounding a conflict that should have been so extremely obviously recognized as extremely serious to the point that my efforts on this podcast should have made a substantial difference in my life long ago, my life circumstances continue to not have meaningfully or clearly improved at all whatsoever. I still have not ever received any compensation or reward of any kind whatsoever for any of my efforts at all involving the conflict being addressed by this podcast, neither directly nor indirectly from any source. I am, always have been, and always will be absolutely unconditionally unwilling to ever at all accept any compensation or reward whatsoever, directly or indirectly, that at all compromises my integrity, whether directly or indirectly. I do not, never have, and never will consent to it being at all considered to be me and or any entity operating at all with my consent and or best interests regarding any communication somehow claiming and or implying that I somehow do ever have and or ever will unofficially support any kind of position at all contradictory with what I've said on this podcast. This disclaimer and notice of intent supersedes any and all contrary interpretations, explicitly including any and all unauthorized claims therein made against me. I reserve all legal, expressive, spiritual, moral, and intellectual rights without limitation. Any attempt to silence, reinterpret, discredit, and or co-opt this documentation shall be treated as malicious bad faith conduct and may be cited in formal legal proceedings as evidence of further targeting. First, I'd like to go back to Kimmy's stream I addressed some parts of in the last released on this podcast.
So true. I could really go for a massage. Actually, I'm kind of jealous of this guy for getting a massage. I'm jealous of you, Max. Actually, let's not name him Max because it reminds me of Max in GTA. What name can we name you? Like, next time I invite a guy over, I'll just like tuck him into bed. I'll be like, oh, that's just Max. He's my favorite. Let me show you which one I want. Oh my god, I want it so bad. I don't even I don't even know why Labubus are so popular, man. Like, what are they even so popular for? I feel like they're gonna go out of popularity soon. So, like, what's even the point? I want to end with Max. I'm obsessed with Max. I can't stop thinking about Max. Yo, Kimmy, what is this doll? Are you down bad or what? Rice Poseidon, stop projecting, okay? If you see this doll and you think somebody's down bad because of this doll, then you're probably down bad, okay? So shut up, Rice Poseidon. Stop judging me and Max. Stop judging Max. He has feelings. It's the towel? What, do you want me to get banned? Rice, this is an acupuncture doll made for educational purposes, and its anatomy is very precise and proportional to a human's anatomy. So of course they had to include, parts of the male anatomy. I personally wanted the female one because it made me more comfortable because I am a girl, but the female one had boobs, and I'm like, I can't cover that, so male it is. Why do you have a perfectly sized towel? It's just a hand cloth. What do you mean? He's packing. I am so angel, so I've never seen one of those in real life, but like, he's not packing, he's I think it's there just to like, be there, but like, I wouldn't say he's really packing. I think it's just like, yeah. It's okay, Max. Size doesn't matter. You're making so many people feel so good right now, Max, because of your personalities. See, now, aren't you guys so relaxed and grateful knowing that you don't have a needle in your ass crack? Like, life could be worse, No, I had a lot of good times in LA, and there are a lot of moments that made me have severe PTSD and trauma, but like, we had a lot of good moments together as well. We made a lot of good memories and met some good friends. Matthew! Oh my god, Matthew! Wait. What was his... Wait, isn't his name Matt? Or was it Mike? Wait. Max! Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. I'm so bad with names. Max. Never mind. I'm so bad with names. I'm so sorry, Max. like, if I go on a podcast, I'm scared I'll say something that, like, I don't want to say. Like, podcasts kind of scare me, no lie. Like, I don't want to say something I don't mean, or, like, I don't know. I have so much respect for people who can do podcasts. This is not a good game. I was distracted by Max. You're very distracting, Max. You're just so handsome. I'm so drawn to your washboard abs. Max likes getting his pectorals tapped on. I'm a freak for the sounds Max brings. You know what, Zach? Fuck yeah. Me too. We're all just little freaks for Max. Wait, what?
There was someone in Kimmy's chat with a name extremely similar to that of the Twitch streamer I called Kimmy out on a stream of when I went to Los Angeles many years ago. That streamer was Ice Poseidon or Paul Danino. Anyways, that Twitch chatter in Kimmy's chat with the extremely suspiciously similar name said Kimmy seems down bad, as if they have hidden behind the scenes information and or connection to Kimmy, and perhaps likely also the situation I've been exposing with this podcast. Kimmy extremely strangely suddenly referred to the acupuncture doll as Mike instead of Max upon that Twitch chatter's message. To me, this suggests that extremely false narratives that have been attempting to endlessly exploit me through non-consensually misrepresenting me as a microphone and or as if to falsely present some kind of leverage over me in relation to what microphone setup Kimmy uses for her content relates to Paul and the time I ended up appearing on his stream several years ago over this conflict. Kimmy literally said there were a lot of moments that made her have severe PTSD and trauma, eye twitching and all. That's the same fraud that claims she forgot everything that happened in her life the last 5 to 7 years. Let the record show she's such a fraud that she constantly lies in an extremely incoherent, inconsistent manner that demonstrates extremely severe mental illness. This is especially relevant since she's been trying to frame me as the one with extremely severe mental illness all along the last 7+ years, ever since she ghosted me after leading me on and narcissistically love-bombing me for the first, year of our connection prior. Also, I'd like to note the extreme contrast between how Kimmy keeps talking about her PTSD and traumas basically as an excuse to continue to hide things and refrain from providing actually adequate clarity or insights to me in any meaningful capacity, seemingly as much as possible, whereas I'm clearly providing detail and never trying to add to the confusion of the situation or make excuses to hide things in any manner that's indicative of me somehow actually being at fault for anything with any kind of malicious or even generally selfish thoughts, feelings towards anyone at any point in time. Kimmy also later goes on to randomly refer to her acupuncture doll she originally named Max as Matthew. Matthew is the name of one of the scumbags I once called a friend who has, for many years since high school, formed this extremely strange close bond with my biological brother, who seemed to get closer and closer to Matthew while Matthew pushed me away more and more. To me, it seems my biological brother has been inflicting defamation on me to Matthew, and Matthew was all too willing to buy whatever lies my biological brother was selling him, because Matthew has secretly had malicious intent towards me for a very long time. It appears he's been a lot more substantially involved in harming me than I originally thought. It's just more evidence I totally made the correct decision, cutting off everyone from my past and completely staying away permanently. I won't be having mercy on any of them. Matthew is no exception. Kimmy explicitly said she has so much respect for people who can do podcasts, yet she continually, increasingly egregiously, in fact, demonstrates unapologetic disrespect towards me. I've been running this podcast for over a year now. Most of my releases are 2+ hours long, and the substance I demonstrate in the content I produce is exceptional. Objectively, it doesn't matter if my releases hardly get any views. The amount of attention isn't directly proportional to the value it provides, especially since the YouTube algorithm is optimized for what seems most likely to get views, not what's objectively the best for progressing humanity in a positive direction. Most people in society don't really care about improving the overall state of humanity, since they'd rather chase shallow, short-term comfort and pleasure and thrill and whatever. And those that perhaps use YouTube for more informational content probably typically would seek out information less heavily addressing personal issues and conflicts with extremely fraudulent psychopath, narcissist, criminal, celebrity, subhuman filth like Kimmy and her associates. Kimmy said something weird about tapping on pectorals. Don't know what that's about. I've never had any fixation on giving and or receiving that kind of treatment, in case that's worth mentioning. Also found it really weird how Kimmy said her audience is all just little freaks for this Max identity. I really don't know what that's supposed to mean, but it certainly sounds like there might be some false narrative that I've wanted Kimmy and or her audience to have some kind of really freaky obsession with me, which is completely false, whether it's sexual and or otherwise in nature. I find it quite suspicious that Kimmy seems to have some kind of behind-the-scenes insight into Labubu's, to the point she feels comfortable dismissing the strange craze over them, both stating supposed confusion on their popularity as well as supposedly feeling they're going to go out of popularity soon. The first time I saw them was when Emaine gave Jackson one on that collaboration stream he did with her and Jamie that I addressed in a previous release on this podcast. Given how that was what I identified as an extremely manipulated, devious targeting of me in what's ultimately a conspiracy and multiple attempts to have me murdered in real life, perhaps Kimmy's exposing the Labubu craze as revealing the extent to which guilty individuals are relevant to existential attacks on me and ultimately perhaps to have me murdered in real life that follow. Since Jamie's mentioned that Arya has many Labubus and literally said Arya's crazy in that context, that conclusion I'm coming to seems to be rather consistent with my assertion that Arya's energy is extremely aggressively, publicly, blatantly, officially attempting to have me murdered in real life. I found it quite unsettling that Kimmy seems to be implying that I've ever given any indication I'd be okay with her inviting guys over, which I imagine it's not a stretch to believe she intends to do sexual activities of some kind with while being with me, and that I'd not only allow it, but even perhaps see it as a reward and or generally appropriate for her to tuck me into bed because I'm supposedly her favorite. That's not okay. Kimmy expressed being obsessed with an inability to stop thinking about this Max identity, perhaps implying those feelings towards the reality of my life that's been egregiously misrepresented entirely against my consent to my detriment with that identity. I want it to be extremely clear that I've never cared for weird, vague, obsessive behavior from Kimmy towards me, and it doesn't appease me, force me to shut up, change my position, or offer anyone any real leverage over me, entirely regardless of how exactly she does it frames it, explains it. It offers me no benefit, gives me no pleasure, and is something I see as an empty, perhaps even negative gesture. If her intense fixation on me isn't genuine, open, and with good intentions, then she's just a stalker I'd rather eliminate from my life completely as quickly as possible. Kimmy's behavior revealed to me potential extremely false narratives that, for whatever reasons, I consider my genitals to be there just to be there, as in representing a lack of desire from me to actually utilize them substantially in sexual intimacy with a potential partner. That's completely false. Considering she said suspicious things in relation to such a narrative around dialogue of size doesn't matter, this also suggests she might have been intentionally perpetuating false narratives that my genitals are particularly small and or I have some kind of insecurity regarding them. Also completely false in every possible scenario. I've never felt insecure about my genitals, and 6 inches long when fully erect is definitely not particularly small. I've also never felt like I need to neglect my genitals to make others feel good, nor to produce my female voice or my chest that's actually at about a B-cup breast size despite me being born male and never being on hormone replacement therapy. Kimmy extremely strangely, basically blatantly stated that this Max identity should be grateful they're not getting anally penetrated, indicating whoever's been egregiously falsely misrepresenting me through it probably low-key actually wants to be anally penetrated, because I've never felt relaxed and or grateful to see Kimmy and or any of her associates' content out of feeling concerned that I'd face actual physical anal penetration if I didn't pay the kind of attention to it that I do. Now, let's look at Kimmy's following stream, taking a look at the tweet she made announcing it. I'm going to have to try to rely on a combination of irrefutable evidence I've gathered, critical thinking, spirituality, and intuition to really evaluate what's going on here. The white heart emoji that's part of the murderous energy from Arya attacking me remains in Kimmy's bio area, meaning to me that she's still fundamentally operating from that energy. But the tweet itself there used a brown heart emoji, meaning to me that the precise target of her attack in that instance specifically has a focus redirected away from being completely on me and now instead more heavily onto one or more entities that the brown heart emoji spiritually symbolizes her desire and intent to target. I'm not personally aware of any solid evidence of who or what it'd be, but I don't find that surprising since she's obviously intentionally been trying to keep it as hidden as possible for as long as possible. If I had to take my best guess, I'd say it's probably targeting the Twitch streamer Big Skanger and or his Grand Theft Auto role-playing character Zakid. My perspective on Kimmy's stream perhaps explains why.
So, after my stream last week, he was sitting on my desk and he kind of scared me. And I woke up in the morning and I just saw him staring at me, laying on my desk. And it kind of freaked me out. So I put Max in my drawer, in my dresser for the week. But now that he's here, he's returned to being Max, you know what I mean? I feel like so like unstable. Are you okay? Mind you, I bought these from like all the same company, by the way. Their their cute quality assurance. Not very consistent, but it's fine. I spent the entire weekend partying and drinking for the first time since I turned 30. Oh god. It was both Jamie and Lena's birthday party this weekend. Jeez. Alright. Let's try two. We will try both of our loud. Oh, that might be too loud. I won't do it super loudly. We'll start it gently. We'll be demure in the beginning. Okay, that's not too bad. I like how 2 fills up the sound a bit more. Thank you, Yuzu-chan, but we don't comment about people's appearances. That's toxic. Okay. Hi, Kimmy. I'm missing YouTube videos. Any updates on when they're coming back, and how are you doing? Thank you for asking how I'm doing. I'm doing better. I'm planning on coming back to YouTube soon. I was actually talking to my editor today, Nubby, so it is in the works. I feel like I was able to find what I was looking for in this time off of YouTube videos, if you know what I mean. Sometimes you just have to take a step back sometimes to see things a different way. I'm definitely the type of person who tunnel visions, and I'm the type where I need to take a step back to reevaluate things sometimes. So yeah, you'll notice I do that a lot with the things I'm always working on. I always have to take a step back and be wait, because I hate that. I don't ever want to get too lost in the sauce and get to the point where I don't recognize who I am. You know what I mean? And I think it's really easy to lose yourself in content creation, and I don't like that feeling. And not only content creation, but also work and relationships, and also the relationship with yourself as well. It's very important, and it's never a good thing to lose yourself in anything. I think it should be all of our priority to make sure we are staying aligned with ourselves and what we want out of life and who we are as a person. Good night, good night, good night. Everybody who is resting, relaxing, sleeping, I hope you all have sweet dreams. I will see you in your dreams. I will haunt you in your dreams until you use your Twitch Prime. Okay, I want to come back to the 3DO, but I wanted to try something else first as well this stream, and that is my Blue Yeti. honestly, I wish I was Max. Are you kidding me? He just gets to get massaged every day. You know, I'm not gonna lie, so today, I ordered a soup from this Korean restaurant, and it's called a hangover soup. And it's not because I was hungover or anything. You know, I don't get hungover. I'm Korean. I can take my alcohol. But I got the hangover soup with pork dumplings, and oh my god, it's so good. So good. And there's so many acupuncture points on the abs. Got rock hard abs. Do you hear that? Those are all his muscles. Man, has he been working out? If I have like stuff to use on the Blue Yeti. I cleaned this past week, so I don't have many knickknacks everywhere like usual. But I do have this razor blade. Alright. I don't think that sounds great. Did you guys know that razors have these, like, if you look closely, there are these lines, and instead of buying a new razor, all you do is you break off the notches, because there's usually a thing at the end of your razors that you can pull off. Ow. Like so. And there's like a little thing, a little slit. And all you do is you put the notch in here, and then very carefully you and then there you have a brand spanking new razor. So sharp. Oh my god, that's so sharp. Okay, I feel like a lot of people knew that already, but for the people who did not know that, I just saved you some money. Oh god, was that loud? Alright, let's see what else I got at my desk. What is your thought on ego? I think it's important to have a healthy ego. Obviously, you don't want to have an unhealthy, fragile ego, but you also don't want to have no ego, so go to sleep, go to sleep. This is your sign to go to sleep. Get some good rest for tomorrow. Have a productive day tomorrow. Worry about tomorrow's stuff tomorrow. Okay. Let's switch over to the 3D. I wasn't even planning on using the Blue Yeti this much, but it's such a good mic. Such a good mic. Good mic. Good mic. Good boy mic. If there are any mics in chat, I'm so sorry. I'm like basically like, good mic. Good boy mic. Wow, what a good mic. Alright, so let's begin with our two black. I don't know, it's kind of weird actually. Let's try Blackpink. Welcome. I hope you enjoyed your stay because you can never leave now. Join us until you die, which will be never because people in the community live forever. My kitties. Okay. I'll see you guys on Thursday. Good night, everybody. I'll see you guys on Thursday night. I'm convinced she's possessed. It's called being an entertainer. Dandy. Okay, chill, bro. I don't claim that negative energy. Okay, there is no possessedness happening over here. Okay, goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
Early on, Kimmy mentions she doesn't want the acupuncture doll she calls Max in her life when she's going about her daily life, but she perceives it to turn friendly again as long as used for ASMR. Going off my previous evaluation of this behavior as some kind of strange interpretation of me being perceived to be worthy of being identified with some identity named Max, to me, she's increasingly blatantly making it evident that she has absolutely zero real respect and or love for me. And in fact, she quite clearly feels no real remorse for seeing me as so disposable. She's basically disgusted by my existence if she can't egregiously exploit it to enable and facilitate her ASMR content creation. But she sees this extremely fabricated and controlled, abusive misrepresentation of me as friendly in her extremely restricted, controlled, biased context of what is essentially her cult of followers she calls the community. Of course, I find this extremely deeply disturbing, hurtful, unpleasant, and undesirable. But Kimmy clearly only really wants to make it increasingly, extremely, painfully, abundantly evident that she really couldn't care less. So I suppose I should focus less on repeatedly mentioning how extremely hurtful her attitude and behavior towards me is, and more on just fulfilling the prophecy I've been saying all along, that her choosing to adopt and persist with this kind of attitude and behavior towards me, how she has and still is, will ultimately result in the absolute devastation and destruction of her life and likely multiple of her associates' lives, especially those I've seen so extremely substantially relevant to the ongoing conspiracy to murder me that I've explicitly named them on this podcast and stated my intent to formally sue and press criminal charges on them. In Kimmy explicitly pointing out the paradox of how balls she gets that sound good actually sound bad for the sake of ASMR, since she wants them noisier for ASMR, whereas a ball of actually high quality should make less noise, I see that as representing the potential and ultimately consequential impact of causing drama, chaos, confusion, and effectively exploitable, heavily reactive emotional states and responses to her prior stream. Since I exposed the reality of how egregiously she's been exploiting what's in reality my influence in the world in order to attempt to selfishly gain attention for herself on the internet through egregious defamation of me, knowingly against my consent to my detriment, which she normally otherwise was robbing me of my energy, forcing me to respond to simply to survive, she didn't get the kind of storm of chaos and confusion she was hoping to have been able to manipulate me into unintentionally, non-consensually facilitating her into selfishly gaining from through inflicting on me. Her previous attack on me was something I was much more easily able to read through, so she tried something she appears to have believed would be more effective at abusing me into falling into a deteriorated energetic vibration, which she was hoping to endlessly exploit how she has in the past. Kimmy started with a new black ball, saying it spins forever, it's gonna keep on going. Blackballing someone is trying to force them out of a group. If we consider Kimmy's efforts to clearly indicate her intentions to blackball me out of any sense of belonging as part of either her friend group in general and or some kind of successful, abundant environment with other prominent individuals that would otherwise perhaps quite appreciate and enjoy my presence in their lives, then this indicates Kimmy's increasingly blatant, aggressive, egregiously inappropriate efforts and attempts to extremely abusively force me out of the influential, prominent position of power I truly deserve. She appears to either believe and or be trying to convince others to believe that she's in some kind of position of power where she can endlessly spin some kind of extremely false narrative she's fully consciously and intentionally aware is fake, that attempts to leave me in endless perpetual terror and torment that forever suppresses and sabotages me, and that I'd have to fight against just to survive if I hadn't cut Kimmy and her associates completely out of my life how I have. Further, at least from my perspective, she's making her intent to attempt to endlessly exploit Big Skenger and or Zakid through her attempted endless exploitation of me evident, which I imagine most likely also involves some kind of her blackballing him as well. Seems like the energy leading to Kimmy ending up dating the Twitch streamer Big Skenger in their short-lived Grand Theft Auto role-playing relationship between September Foos and Zakid has something to do with narratives that associate Big Skenger as a dog, likely with some kind of attachment specifically to Kimmy's dog Pix that her parents now take care of. This would suggest that Kimmy actually interacted with that guy, directly and or indirectly, knowingly, for a very long time, before that whole situation between them publicly. It's either that, or the energy Kimmy's been putting out in regards to the kind of life partner she's been trying to attract all along has effectively manifested as that guy, who then must be trying extremely hard, undoubtedly in what he's only increasingly clearly learning is sheer futility, to destiny swap with me. I imagine all these frauds expected me to end up getting sucked into the Grand Theft Auto role-playing situation where that guy called Max, who basically introduced Kimmy's September Foos character into that world, would also be trying to introduce me into it, and it seems to me that Big Skenger's Zakid character likely was trying to set up some kind of chaotic situation where I'd be trapped in some kind of setup that made it seem like he was some important person in my life and probably even some kind of teacher to me, while in reality he was just fully, knowingly, and intentionally assisting all the subhuman filth attempting to rob me of my soul, do various destiny swap crimes against me, and ultimately conspire and attempt to have me murdered in real life repeatedly until the point they were hoping that either it'd succeed and I'd end up dead or lose my mind from the stress and end up institutionalized in jail or a mental health facility for life, or constantly in and out and effectively disabled from ever revealing the truth of what's been done to me. Kimmy mentioned the silver ball rather strangely. To me, the silver ball represents Arya's energy to a much more potent and pure extent than any other ball she might play with. Kimmy's recognition of it being an extremely unstable energy to me would indicate the reality of Arya's life likely being extremely difficult, turbulent, and unstable, perhaps in general, but likely especially in more recent times. With Kimmy saying that energy really matches her, it seems she's exposing herself for in reality being an extremely prominent reason that Arya's current life circumstances are as they are, especially particularly in the negative aspects as such. With Kimmy questioning to it, "Are you okay?" indicates to me that Arya is perhaps in reality very much not okay behind the scenes right now, directly as a result of Kimmy's continued extreme egregious neglect to take any even remotely adequate extent of accountability for the reality of how prominent of a role she's played in this conspiracy and ongoing attempted murder of me in real life. With Kimmy questioning the quality and saying the quality assurance is bad, it suggests to me that she's been aware that whatever help she energetically gets from Celine's involvement is rather inconsistent. And given how I personally experienced Celine's involvement in exploitation of me, I can understand why rather clearly. Kimmy added a bunch more balls to those she was spinning, indicating an increasingly complex web of energetic manipulation she's clearly been abusing divination extremely badly to enable and facilitate her exploitation of me through. Since she's clearly such subhuman filth, she so extremely egregiously looks down on me, it's time I really expose what she's doing more clearly, especially now that this piece of trash has really made things so extremely painfully clear to me. Kimmy has said in the past that the black and pink ball energy reminds her of September and Zakid, indicating it's at the forefront of energetic manipulation she has been abusing in her attempts to see the conspiracy and attempts to murder me to its end. In the success, her and all the other subhuman filth involved are only making it increasingly extremely evident they've been extremely seriously hoping and enduring in efforts to achieve. While the pink ball seems to indicate Lily's energy, more pronounced in a pure pink ball and mixed in with Arya's murderous energy in the scenario of it being pink with silver lines, the black and silver ball seems to indicate an extremely heavily political energy abusing all the things I've said in the past that's being exploited as it's mixed in with Arya's murderous energy being directed at me. The result is Kimmy increasingly egregiously exploits my energy and efforts entirely to my detriment against my consent to selfishly gain for herself, and in this case, she's somehow selfishly gaining off attacking someone else more aggressively, likely fabricating some kind of conflict between me and that person that clearly isn't actually addressing any issue I'd actually have with that person, if any, and then framing me as if to have consented to her doing so. The route for me to most potently expose the true reality of Kimmy and Big Skenger and their grand theft auto role-playing enabled and facilitated false narrative generation is through extremely meticulously deconstructing and attacking Lily's and Arya's combined murderous energy, attacking me by fully consciously and intentionally entirely non-consensually weaponizing my own communication against me in what will only become increasingly extremely clearly irrefutably evident truly has been the completely sincere endeavor pursuing the kind of connection with Kimmy I've always been claiming to have been engaging in. The weaponizing of my own efforts occurred in concurrency with perpetuation of extremely egregious false narrative generation occurring as extremely egregious defamation being inflicted on me by my blood relatives, that subhuman filth Chloe I attended high school with, and likely also, to some extent, other subhuman filth I also attended high school with, who I know are substantially close to Chloe, and who I was once also friends with, named Jerry and Herman. They were both much, much closer to each other and to Chloe than any of them ever were to me. Since I've seen what I consider sufficient evidence in the past to suggest that my subhuman filth blood relatives, particularly my biological brother, have been fully, knowingly, and intentionally conspiring against me in collaboration with Chloe, likely heavily involving through Matthew, this means I'm going to have to further expose and attack all of those subhuman filth to deconstruct their extremely egregious defamation of me that ultimately attempts to endlessly perpetuate my current living circumstances. They're all fully consciously and intentionally attempting to inflict on me entirely against my consent to my detriment. In the past, in the one time I've actually seen Matthew ever since high school, he randomly showed up one day and basically ambushed me at a time I was at my biological father's house, trying to absolutely decimate my self-esteem and basically convince me I'm a massive loser that should completely give up on all my efforts standing up for myself in all the chaos Kimmy's extremely reckless disregard for the truth and extensive sustained long-term abuse, neglect, and defamation of me has had on my life. Matthew tried to get me to add him as a friend or perhaps even simply talk to him on Discord. I showed no interest in it, refused to engage with it, and never even seriously considered it, intuitively feeling how extremely shady the whole thing was. Given my biological father's clear, heavy involvement in that whole incident, which also actually included my biological brother, by the way, who also extremely deviously tried to basically support Matthew in his efforts to gaslight and deviously coerce me into silence, I find it exceptionally suspicious that my biological father once mentioned that he couldn't wait for me to never return into his life because he wanted to go on cruises for the rest of his life. At this point, I see reason to suspect my biological father has been plotting for many years to manipulate my other blood relatives into disrespecting and neglecting me so he could fake his death, fully consciously and intentionally, entirely to my detriment against my consent, so he could basically retire and spend the rest of his life taking cruises and being the degenerate gambling addict he is. To the last time I ever spoke to him long ago, he extremely stubbornly insisted on staying in his delusions that he can somehow defy the laws of the universe and find some loophole in the fundamentally mathematically unfavorable reality of how roulette is inherently rigged in favor of the house to be impossible to use any strategy to truly gain any consistent long-term edge over. He's so extremely stubborn in his delusions about it that I literally wrote a bunch of code to automate extensive simulation of various roulette strategies and even produced a fully functional, extensive configurable roulette simulation engine capable of implementing variations of his strategies with a whole interface to both configure the strategy engine as well as play roulette normally and see exactly what the engine does in real time if it's running. And even despite extensive efforts from me to show him an objectively indisputable fact of reality, he utterly refused to acknowledge I'd proven a fact any reasonably intelligent individual with decent mathematics skills can easily acknowledge. That roulette is impossible to cheat in a manner similar to how some other forms of gambling can be manipulated with certain knowledge, strategies, and training in order to leverage a slight edge over the house if you want to take professional gambling actually seriously. Oh, and he'd still call me the delusional one, literally telling me that he feels more qualified to make an evaluation on my mental health than multiple licensed mental health professionals evaluating me on court order, claiming that his opinion on my mental health holds more weight because he knows me. Accordingly, I suspect that Kimmy is stuck in some extremely toxic relationship with Big Skanger and or Zakid behind the scenes because they believe themselves to be responsible for causing the death of my biological father, likely because my biological father intends to behave, pretending as if I owe it to him to suffer immensely constantly for the rest of my life so he can live in extreme luxury and comfort while never having truly provided anything even close to that for me, nor having ever even really been a good parent to me in general. He only really ever extremely reluctantly provided the absolute bare minimum financially that my biological mother had to fight in court extremely badly to win child supports to get, which is literally the absolute bare minimum that he legally was forced to. Then I experienced for myself how narcissistic and abusive my father really is after I went to live with him after I turned 18. That whole situation definitely ties heavily into the life insurance fraud. I know my biological father definitely extremely heavily, fully consciously and intentionally played a part in, especially since I recall my biological brother mentioning to me that he saw a bank statement of my biological father's account with $300,000 in it, which likely was the stolen money my biological father obtained from the life insurance fraud. Again, I've never received any of that money, and I will never be pursuing obtaining any of it or any other financial resources from my biological father in any capacity to any extent ever again. I have no desire and or willingness to ever have to shoulder the burden of the karma that subhuman filth brought upon himself for what is undoubtedly conscious and intentional involvement in the conspiracy and attempts to murder me in real life. I've seen reason to suspect there are actually one or more humans who have been successfully murdered in real life as a result of all the egregious defamation targeting me entirely against my consent to my detriment, which these extremely extensive attempts to warp narratives about the reality of my life attempt to frame me for in order to attempt to justify having me murdered as some kind of justice. If my suspicion is correct, whoever it was that got murdered, I didn't actually know them at all and wasn't ever friends with and or romantically and or sexually involved with them in any capacity to any extent, nor did I ever want to be, nor was I ever given any adequate reason to even consider specifically targeting them to be murdered, and there's absolutely zero real evidence to at all prove otherwise. The karma for all harm caused by exploitation of my existence entirely against my consent to my detriment will have to be endured by all my enemies who have participated in this ongoing conspiracy and attempts to murder me. My efforts were never fundamentally intended to harm anyone, enable, facilitate, and or incite any unlawful behavior, much less result in something as serious as anyone getting murdered in real life. I'm extremely confident I can and will objectively prove the reality of who I am beyond any reasonable doubt. I found it exceptionally strange that Kimmy literally said that commenting about people's appearances is toxic. She directly ties that into plans to come back to YouTube soon. She feels like she was able to find what she was looking for. What does that even mean? To me, it appears that I'm being so extremely egregiously extensively attacked with defamation that me ever saying that someone is physically attractive is now being weaponized to attempt to frame me as toxic. And it doesn't take me very long to imagine how such a narrative is fundamentally being formed and who the first perpetrator of it and the effective source of, to this day actively purporting it, truly is. The subhuman filth named Chloe, who I went to high school with over a decade ago. So, it's become evident to me that most likely there are extreme substantial narratives behind the scenes that relate cosplaying to Arya and attempt to tie some kind of heavy significance of that to me, which attempts to justify Arya's energy that attempts to portray itself as loving, positive, and somehow desired by me, while in reality being the complete opposite as far as my actual experience of its effects in my life. Giving Arya at least some benefit of the doubt, let's say she's genuinely exceedingly confused, since I imagine she'd actually attempt to argue she believes herself to actually be giving me something I want, which is why she feels so confident enabling and facilitating this murderous energy attacking me. There's only one real explanation that ties all these things together from my perspective. I've basically already explained all this before, but perhaps it's worth trying to explain it one last time with hopefully even more clarity and conciseness. So, not very long after that one-on-one encounter with Chloe that I've mentioned before, about a month after, she ended up posting a picture online with her doing a cosplay of a character named Mikasa from an anime called Attack on Titan, particularly a picture of her in the cosplay with her butt front and center and her looking over her shoulder at the viewer. It was evident to me that she did it with some kind of clear intent to make it apparent to me that she did it with the feelings I'd expressed towards her in mind, since she went out of her way to get pink streaks in her hair dyed temporarily, which is not like the actual character in the anime. I've never watched Attack on Titan in my life, nor have I ever had any fixation on Mikasa and or any other characters from it. I had absolutely no involvement in whatever convinced her to effectively show off her butt to me specifically while deciding to cosplay that character like that, or even in a cosplay context in general. I've never had and or expressed any particular desire to see anyone cosplay anything in my entire life, and I don't imagine that's ever going to change in the future either. If Chloe was actually trying to show off her butt for me with no ulterior motives and in the manner I'd most prefer, she should have worn skin-tight black, extremely glossy latex leggings and a latex top, and simply as casual, classy clothing, not a cosplay. If she didn't want to, and or couldn't get those clothes for whatever reasons, but still wanted to do the next best thing, she should have just worn regular skin-tight black leggings, which definitely must have been obtainable by her, and whatever reasonably tight shirt that didn't at all cover her butt. Again, not at all as a cosplay. Still, I found her body extremely exceptionally attractive for a very long time, and heavily touched myself to that picture of her butt multiple times daily for many years that followed, despite how unideal her clothing choice in it has always been to me. It seems to me that Chloe used extremely false narratives about her true intentions behind doing that cosplay and showing off her body online how she did through it, to inflict increasingly egregious defamation on me to whoever would listen, for her own extremely selfish gain, to start a business off of harming my reputation, relationships, career, and life as a whole, obviously knowing she was doing so entirely against my consent to my detriment. In high school, especially after seeing Chloe's extremely narcissistic and blatantly racist rejection of me, I didn't try to keep it a secret that I find Korean women exceptionally attractive in general. I asked a Korean girl to prom, the only Korean girl in my entire grade, named Gracia, whose younger sister was the only other Korean I knew of in the entire high school, the entire time I attended it. It sort of bothered me that the connection just didn't feel natural to begin with, since we didn't really share any mutual friends or ever hang out together or even really seem to have much in common. But I genuinely did find her quite physically attractive, substantially more than most other females I ever saw during my time in high school. I eventually reached a point where I really just thought, the worst that could happen would be she'd reject me, but that's nothing new to me. She actually ended up seeming a lot more interested and receptive to my interest than I thought she'd be, which I would have embraced, but it just felt sort of weird and fake. I'm not trying to talk badly of Gracia or blame her for anything. It just sort of made me realize how weird and fake the whole typical dating process in society really feels to me. It felt like she was somehow extremely deviously trying to get some kind of really unfair control and dominance over my life by knowing something I didn't or something. Maybe I was just being paranoid and pessimistic, but ultimately I just felt like it was really heading in a direction where she would have wanted to have children with me. I've already explained my feelings about ever having children on this podcast, and it can be a really sensitive and complicated topic to approach, especially to someone that hardly knows you. I didn't want to lead her on or get involved in something I felt right from the beginning probably wouldn't last, so I figured it'd be best to just stay distant from Gracia and move on unless she really seemed to be so attracted to me that she reasonably quickly actually assertively pursued me in a manner that didn't leave me with that weird feeling that she was trying to control me unfairly. She never did, but to this day, I have no hard feelings towards her, and I still believe I made the correct decision. I imagine Chloe's been so desperate to try to make me look like the problem that she tries to extremely deviously misrepresent what's basically just a lack of real chemistry and connection between me and Gracia as some kind of indication that I'm being malicious and toxic whenever I express finding someone physically attractive. Which, since she rejected me based on racism, she seems to want to do some destiny swap thing on me by projecting her own racist and discriminatory and shallow tendencies onto me by trying to make it seem like I was being racist, sexist, something like that towards Gracia, and then trying to justify rejecting me herself by acting like I've proven I must have had similar malicious attitudes in my behavior towards Chloe in my approach towards her. In reality, if Chloe actually liked me and hadn't rejected me, especially as brutally as she had, I never would have tried to move on from her and approached Gracia how I did. Which, again, doesn't mean I've been dishonest about my general preference of the appearance of Korean women. I've already explained that Chloe is an extremely exceptional case of me finding a non-Korean woman so unbelievably extremely physically attractive. Clearly, she's tried to really convolute all this in her extreme desperation to hide what she really did and shift blame onto me so she doesn't have to face how unbelievably extremely toxic she's really been to me and likely also others she's ever had some kind of substantial romantic situation with. I imagine Chloe to likely have started spreading lies about me to Lily out of jealousy, suspecting that I'd be most likely to be interested in Lily since Chloe likely felt Lily technically should meet whatever requirement Gracia might not have in what I was looking for in a partner, which she then uses her extremely warped misrepresentation of me to attempt to prove all my past behavior must have been malicious, because I didn't gravitate towards who she believes should have been my natural choice if I'd been authentic in expressing myself when she knew me. In reality, my perception of it is that I didn't gravitate to Lily over Kimmy because, well, to be blunt, Lily just kind of gave off a low-key, really depressed vibe to me. And to be clear, I'm saying that just to provide my own perspective and explain my behavior, not as criticism of her or some kind of attack on her. I know a lot of people dislike and maybe even make fun of Lily for her voice, but I don't find it unpleasant. She's quite physically attractive to my tastes as far as her appearance goes. Her energy just felt off to me, and I didn't want to hate on her or go out of my way to interact with her and end up doing something that could unintentionally make her feel even worse somehow than she probably already did about her life, so I just left her alone. I always saw it as me being considerate. I wouldn't be surprised if Chloe was at least partially operating from a place of some kind of deep depression in how she behaved towards me, so she gravitated towards someone that had an energy similar to hers to cry victim to. It's not that I'm incapable of trying to understand why Chloe might have behaved how she has chosen to towards me, but rather that no amount of understanding would ever change the practical consequences of her actions. She never really liked me, but wanted to make her extremely serious problems mine, entirely against my consent to my detriment, knowing she was intentionally inflicting a purely malicious effect on my life by egregiously exploiting my obviously genuine sexual desires towards her. And she clearly hasn't cared to put any real boundary on irreparably, extremely deeply harming any potential for a real connection between us far beyond any potential for repair. When you throw in my blood relatives, Matthew, and whoever else from my past who are all trying to selfishly achieve their own goals as they betray me, lie about me, and try to manipulate me and others constantly, even long after I'd completely distanced myself from them and focused on myself, Somehow, all this deception happening behind my back must have led to egregiously false narratives presenting that Arya somehow would be ideal to me. In reality, nobody has ever had any even remotely objectively adequate reason to believe so. I mean, look, sure, I'd say Arya's substantially more physically attractive than the average woman, at least as far as my preferences go. I've never been trying to say she's hideous looking, or even ugly, but I'm not going to want her or even just tolerate being with her simply because she's a considerably physically attractive celebrity. That's such a shallow and empty foundation for what's supposed to be a really intimate relationship. I've never been working towards and or willing to tolerate that kind of thing with anyone, and Arya's no exception. Kimmy went off on a whole spiel about needing to take a step back sometimes and reevaluating things, but I seriously questioned both her intent in saying all that, along with her sincerity, and the practical consequences of what she might actually do as a result. She wants to act like some highly enlightened spiritual teacher or something, saying not to lose herself in anything, huh? Prioritize staying aligned with yourself and what you want out of life and who you are. She sure knows how to run her mouth saying the words that she thinks will sound good. But all I'm hearing is she's extremely disingenuously trying to manipulate me into giving her more chances to betray me over and over by trying to soften my heart to the possibility that she's not actually a completely irredeemable subhuman filth, fully deserving of the complete destruction of her life I'm going to have to fulfill my prophecy on executing on, because she clearly doesn't, never has, and never intends to truly respect me, love me, care about me at all. I'm not backing down, and I'm never falling for that trap again. She's doomed for being the subhuman filth she is. I'll make sure of it. Genuine, meaningful feelings demand meaningful action to prove them, not the same narcissistic breadcrumbing garbage I've been getting for so long. She's just setting herself up to get exposed even harder every time, doing disingenuous garbage like that. Kimmy had some weird thing where she basically tried to intimidate her audience, saying she'll haunt their dreams until they use their Twitch Prime. I haven't used Twitch Prime ever on anyone, and I have no plans to do so anytime soon, if ever, in case that's worth mentioning. I'm not at all intimidated by Kimmy's weird passive-aggressive coercion garbage anytime she tries things like that. It's just a really bad look for her in this increasingly incriminating, damning pile of evidence I'll be using in a formal courtroom when suing and pressing criminal charges on her and her associates. I've now noticed a pattern of this extremely strange thing of Kimmy saying she would like to buy all her audience's chocolate. There's definitely got to be some kind of hidden meaning behind that statement. It's such a strange thing to say, especially randomly after saying she's got her audience awake and right where she wants them. Since there's a certain, especially malicious, fraudulent subhuman filth who has inflicted egregious defamation on me, and for reasons unknown to me substantially identifies with chocolate, I suspect that extremely strange statement from Kimmy has something to do with the Chloe I went to high school with. I really don't know where the name Max got so much strange significance from in all this, but I most certainly don't possess many of the qualities Kimmy has dialogue describing him having. I most certainly don't get massaged every day. I haven't gotten a massage in years, and it's been even substantially longer than that. since I've had an even half decent massage, and I've literally never even once in my entire life got a massage I'd consider actually good. I've gotten very few massages in my entire life to begin with, and I have no particular fixation with getting massages in general. Kimmy's mentioned her ability to handle drinking alcohol a few times in the past, and to me, every time, it seemed to be from a place of insecurity and trying to hide something rather than a genuine statement. I've never really cared, which is why I've never really thought it was something worth mentioning, but perhaps I should explicitly mention that while I recognize Koreans are typically known for being able to tolerate alcohol exceptionally well, this is not and has never been a quality I find particularly impressive and or have ever particularly wanted and or required in anyone in my life, whether I see them as a romantic prospect or not. I mean, I prefer avoiding drinking alcohol entirely, and I never allow myself to get put in situations where I feel extremely pressured to drink alcohol and keep up with others drinking or anything like that. So I wouldn't ever put pressure on anyone in my life to drink more or ever be able to handle drinking a lot of alcohol gracefully. Kimmy's mentioned rock hard abs multiple times now, especially when strangely complimenting the Max acupuncture doll she's recently gotten. I really don't know what that's all about, but it really doesn't change anything for me if Kimmy's trying to compliment my physical appearance somehow, especially in a manner I know both isn't an accurate reflection of reality as well as doesn't come off genuine or being said for the reasons I'd want her to say it. Also, it might be worth noting that I've never particularly cared for having hard abs myself, nor seeing them in a potential romantic partner, and I don't and never have found anyone complimenting me that way to be particularly flattering. Kimmy's done this weird thing with razor blades multiple times now, as if to be intimidating someone. To me, the pink indicates she's weaponizing Lily's energy, perhaps indicating to Lily that she wants Lily to feel empowered to attack whoever Kimmy's trying to indicate to attack harder. It seems my efforts have refreshed whatever narratives Kimmy's been attempting to weaponize somehow to the point she feels it appropriate to symbolize that. Kimmy described her perception of ego, and it proved to be shallow and generic. When you talk about ego, there's a critical differentiation between active ego and passive ego. Passive ego resides in a state of basically just existence and awareness where you possess a subjective perception of reality at all, which is a neutral component of ego as a whole. The other component, active ego, is what is being triggered when you objectively, correctly perceive someone as what you might call arrogant, pretentious, delusional, etc. Within possessing any active ego at all, you can have an extremely fragile ego, which makes you extremely prone to emotional and possibly also general mental instability, which is blatantly quite unhealthy. You can also have a varying degree of much less prominent active ego, which basically would mean you have some extent of delusional subjective bias in how you perceive reality, but you don't have some kind of extremely serious mental illness. However, fundamentally, possessing any active ego at all is effectively some degree of mental illness, and even if it's a scenario where at that moment it seems like something trivial, it leaves you vulnerable to being exploited without possibility for effective retaliation, and or generally getting increasingly comfortable living a life intentionally embracing and or neglecting to manage that misperception perception of objective reality in a manner that could ultimately result in you fully consciously and intentionally inflicting serious harm on others with absolutely unconditional, unrestrained, malicious intent, and it's ultimately not a good thing. The irrefutable ideal you should aim for is having absolutely no active ego, but fully retaining your perspective and awareness on reality and a sense of inner purpose to your continued existence. It's a lot easier said than done, but it's very much possible, and the state every individual with a core value of refined, pure, bidirectional apprehension operates within. I've already described the 5-step process I identified about 10 years ago that can empower anyone to consciously embrace their own personal journey towards that level of enlightenment, and I outlined it in substantial detail in a past release on this podcast. I've now noticed a pattern of Kimmy doing things that I consider random and her saying, "This is your sign to whatever." Well, I've never been looking for Kimmy and or anyone else to say, "This is your sign," for me to do anything. None of the times I've ever seen anyone say such a thing in the past has ever been something that has resonated with me, and I'm seriously not looking for anyone to try to find something as such that would somehow at all resonate with me. Waiting for such a thing basically is extremely desperate seeking of external validation to do things you want in life, and someone operating from where I am would never require such a thing. Kimmy talked about using the black and white Blue Yeti microphone because she thought it would make Max sound better. And now is calling it Mike like she previously called the acupuncture doll that. So this name and its relevance to microphones and somehow tying that into the egregious defamation and exploitation of me that led to me making that appearance on Paul's stream several years ago clearly is currently heavily contributing to this ongoing conspiracy to murder me. How exactly, I don't know, but clearly it's being intentionally hidden from me, and all these criminals Kimmy and her associates must know. I've stated multiple times in the past already that I do not and have never identified as non-binary, yet Kimmy is once again extremely strangely showing explicit recognition and consideration of those that identify as non-binary. To me, this seems to indicate that perhaps it relates to how Big Skanger and or Zakid actually secretly identifies, or simply that he perhaps intentionally attempts to cause confusion in regards to identity to attempt to enable and facilitate his attempts to exploit me through my connection with Kimmy. Towards the very end of that stream, Kimmy especially extremely deviously, maliciously attempted to egregiously warp the narrative about the reality of what's happening that I'm exposing with this podcast. She basically, extremely creepily, like a movie villain, tried to frame things as if her and her associates have committed all these crimes against me as some kind of holy actions behaving in the interest of God, or whatever you might want to call some loving higher power or something to that effect. She essentially tried to act like it was intended all along that I'd survive both aggressive attempts to murder me that I've exposed with my last to releases on this podcast and lying that I want, need, and or deserve to have to basically stalk her and allow her to misrepresent me as a member of her community forever while she continues to extremely deviously disrespect, abuse, neglect, ostracize, and existentially assault me increasingly unapologetically. This is extremely unhinged, narcissistic, psychopath behavior I extremely firmly assert is founded in objectively false narratives, extremely heavily misrepresenting the reality of my character as part of what is becoming increasingly obvious is some narrative about my existence that runs parallel to the one I'm presenting on this podcast that constantly attempts to discredit, invalidate, and devour the reality of the truth I'm revealing on this podcast. In what appears to be her reading out a message from her chat saying they're convinced Kimmy's possessed, as in demonic possession, Kimmy ends off trying to justify all her behavior in a huge mist of plausible deniability, trying to act like she's actually a completely different person than I'm asserting her to be based on her public behavior, claiming that she's just being an entertainer. She egregiously abuses simply saying, I don't claim that negative energy, as if simply explicitly claiming you don't claim an energy, whether or not you explicitly frame it as positive or negative, suddenly discredits various irrefutable video evidence of you blatantly proving yourself to possess certain qualities, especially when combined with your demonstrable consistent behavior on a day-to-day basis, further substantiating accompanying claims proving extensive context and perspective to be objectively correct to arrive at certain conclusions as a result of. And then there's Jamie's stream the day before.
Say something stupid. No, I'm not crashing out today. It's my birthday. Also, happy Mother's Day. Where's my happy Mother's Day, guys? Because I take care of you guys. You guys are my children. Did you guys wish your mom a happy birthday? I mean, did you guys wish your mom a happy Mother's Day? Don't forget to wish your mom a happy Mother's Day. Well, I mean, no. The whole point is for me to do it. How do I give subs? Guys, I'm blood type AB. I just receive. We were literally talking about blood types yesterday, like me and the girls, and I thought I was O my whole entire life. Also, is the quality okay? I thought I was O my whole entire life, and then like the doctor actually 3 years ago took my blood, and they were like, wait, Jamie, you're not O, you're AB. And in Asia, it's really common to have blood types as personalities, personality types for blood types, and O is supposed to be super chill, like you're supposed to be able to give, you're selfless. So I thought I was O this whole time. Turns out I'm AB, and so I asked, like, oh, what's AB personality type? And they're like, oh, ABs are known to be psychotic. I was like, oh. So there we are. Guess what I have right now to celebrate my stream? I have Labubu! I have Labubu! So, chat, do you guys know what Labubu is? If you know Labubu, say I know, and if you don't know, say I don't know. I want to know how many people are educated on Labubu. I know. Oh, wow, everyone knows Labubu. IDK, okay, if you don't know what Labubu is like the most hyped thing right now. They're these little cute monster dolls, and they're really hard to get. The demand for it is really high, and they sell out in literally minutes, sometimes seconds, and it's really hard to get your hand on these. And so every Labubu collection, this is the newest collection, it's so hard to get, comes with options. They're blind boxes, and it also comes with a secret that's super rare. So I want to unbox this today. Okay guys, so I actually have 2 of these. I'm gonna let you guys choose which one I unbox. Because the other one, I'm not unboxing. I only want one, so I'm gonna give the other one away. So here are the 2. Which one should I, A or B? Please guys. I really want the purple one, or the secret. A or B? B? Can we do a poll? A poll? Do a poll. A or B? A or B? A is the first one I chose and B is the second one. I'm gonna really rely on you guys. I want the purple one or the secret. I didn't want to choose because I'd be sad if I didn't get it, so I'm gonna blame it on my chat if I don't get what I want. Here, we'll do an ASMR unboxing of my favorite egg chips. Salted egg chips. These are my favorites. Hey, what's your guys' favorite version of me? Because you know, like, my Instagram videos are really different from who I am on stream. And then my YouTube videos are also different. That's a difficult question. I feel like a lot of people would say, like, I don't know. Okay, BRB. Stay, otherwise I'll chop your penis off. It's so crazy, like, you really remember everything. From your youth. The first 20 years of your life is so important. Okay, before I light this candle, I want to say thank you everyone for coming into the stream and wishing me a happy birthday. It means a lot. I love you guys. And I'm excited to grow old with you guys. Hopefully you still all support me when I'm no longer hot. Yeah, anyways. This is my cake. I'm gonna light it now. And I just want to say... every year, I feel really lucky to have experienced the last, like, 8 years with you guys. That's kind of fucking crazy. Like, that's insane. So, yeah. Thank you guys. You're gonna age nice like wine. I think so too. Okay. Should I sing happy birthday to myself? Is that lame? No, I'll do it. Okay. Happy... Happy birthday. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday, dear, the cutest and smartest and most talented, skilled girl in the world. Also known as Jamie. Happy birthday to me. Jamie, make a wish. Okay. Okay. Woo! I have a lot of wishes. I'm a wish girl. La boo boo. La boo la boo. La boo boo. Yes, make sure to call your mom and tell her a happy Mother's Day.
Literally within the first 5 minutes, Jamie refers to her audience as her children. I've never seen Jamie as a mother figure. Quite far from it, actually. A mother figure is supposed to be nurturing, supportive, make you feel safe and loved. I don't get that energy at all from Jamie. I never have. She seems and behaves like an immature, unhinged, bratty, trashy, childish loser to me. I don't consider myself a mother figure to her either, although perhaps she might see me that way. I don't know or care. I never have and don't think I ever will. Jamie both starts her stream really early on and ends off with mentioning to her audience to wish their mothers a happy Mother's Day, indicating to me that she likely has some particular personal interest in seeing at least some she expects to get to behave as if it should be understood watched her content to have done so, or at least for her to have validated narratives in relation to her involvement in their lives by even her simply encouraging them to do so as if she must be a positive influence in their lives. I did not and will not be wishing my biological mother or anyone may perceive as someone I see as a mother figure, happy Mother's Day. There isn't anyone I consider a mother figure in my life, and even my biological mother isn't someone that ever actually played the role of a mother figure even remotely well, to the point I've never really considered her that either. I mean, I know biologically what role a mother has in the childbirth process, but in terms of embodying the qualities an actually decent mother should possess, I never really saw or felt that from her. Since I was very young, she would increasingly frequently start extremely irrational arguments with me that she rapidly escalated into yelling fights she forced me to engage in, or she'd harass me endlessly and try to completely restrict my freedom to do anything, as she explicitly and or implicitly coerced me with the threat of putting me up for adoption or throwing me into homelessness if I didn't tolerate her unbelievably unhinged psychotic attitude. She'd be extremely petty, trauma dump her issues with her marriage and her childhood and family traumas on me, and even sometimes be quite blatantly creepy and basically try to hit on me and imply sexual desires towards me and try to bait or tempt me into making sexual advances on her, which she'd eventually go as far as explicitly, extremely seriously questioning my sexuality and even accusing me of being homosexual with my biological brother because I refused to entertain her extremely creepy behavior towards me, even though I also equally refused any of my biological brother's creepy behavior towards me as well whenever he did anything at all similar. All of it was extremely uncomfortable, unpleasant, felt exceptionally inappropriate to me, and had a negative impact on my life in the shorter and longer term. I genuinely have absolutely no want, need, and or willingness to ever at all allow my biological mother and or any of my other blood relatives back into my life. I've never been looking for anyone to fill a mother figure role in my life either, whether it's Jamie, Kimmy, and or anyone else. If anything, I've always been relying solely on myself to fulfill that role for myself. I'm neither complaining about it nor have any want, need, and or intent for it to change. And to be clear, that doesn't mean I haven't been looking for a partner that's nurturing, supportive, and makes me feel safe and loved. I've just never had any fixation on relating my partner at all to a mother figure or a father figure. That kind of stuff just seems like unresolved childhood traumas manifesting to me. And I don't have those. If you think of what a parental figure represents, they also directly contribute to literally bringing you into physical existence, which inherently inclines itself to various implications of a substantial power dynamic imbalance that's founded on criteria that's literally impossible for anyone that isn't your biological parent to fulfill. I find that fundamentally far too broken of a perception of a partner for it to be functional for someone with as deeply congruent of a mental framework as myself. Jamie mentioned blood types and how she thought she was a different blood type until the last few years after she got her blood checked. Putting aside how strange it is that Jamie supposedly didn't know her blood type until she was in her mid-20s, I want it to be clear that I've never assigned any particular significance to anyone's blood type, and none of my judgments on anyone are or ever have been influenced at all by any knowledge and or assumptions in relation to their blood type and or any kind of prejudices or biases in relation to blood types in general. Jamie talks about educating her audience on this strange Labubu craze. Her initial explanation sounds rather shallow and basically what I already understood from first seeing it mentioned. Then Jamie says she's going to do a poll. So to me, this serves as evidence that Jamie is the reason I was being terrorized and tormented and blocked from a much healthier connection with Kimmy a lot earlier, ultimately to the extent that she was a major contributing factor, if not the entire reason, why I ended up getting so upset I ended up lashing out at Kimmy publicly on Paul's stream all those years ago when I went to Los Angeles. And she's basically exposing herself for attempting to do the same thing again right now, trying to prey on my downfall and emotionally destabilize me into behavior that can be perceived as self-sabotaging, so she can continue to try to exploit any kind of vulnerabilities in my life that she tries to hunt for and exacerbate harm inflicted on my life through. Let the record show Jamie blatantly demonstrates her extreme mental instability and how she then proceeds to show indecisiveness to make a choice because she'd be sad if she didn't get what she wants, so she's gonna blame her chat. So, it seems perhaps she's being forced to more openly expose herself for intentionally refusing to adequately acknowledge my lack of actual desire or interest in her because she always knew I didn't want her and she always wanted and was trying to blame me for her insecurities, inadequacies, and just generally being extremely jealous of Kimmy. With Jamie randomly doing a really short ASMR unboxing, it seems Jamie's also largely behind false narratives associating excessive significance to ASMR in relation to the feelings I've been expressing towards Kimmy and perhaps even my existence as a whole in general. Jamie asked about her audience's favorite version of her, while talking about how she portrays a substantially different image of herself on each social media platform she engages regularly with. I want it to be extremely clear that I don't have any favorite version of Jamie. They're all nothing special to me, and I've never communicated otherwise, nor given anyone any even remotely adequate reason to believe otherwise. Jamie threatens to chop her viewers' genitals off, which makes me feel perhaps it's worth mentioning I do not and never have had any concern over Jamie doing such a thing to me, nor can she ever intimidate me implying she'd do such a thing, nor has she ever actually had any even remotely adequate reason to believe otherwise. I find it curious that Jamie said, "You remember everything from the first 20 years of your life." I remember basically nothing of my life until I was about 10 years old, and everything I do remember of my childhood at any point in time pretty much all sucks extremely badly. I can only suspect I was somehow violated as a very young child, and my mind might be suppressing those memories because they'd be so painful to recall that it'd do absolutely nothing good for me and only make my already extremely difficult survival even more practically unbearable to attempt to hold the weight of enduring. Either way, I explicitly refuse to at all recognize any narratives about me as at all true if I haven't explicitly presented my perspective on them on this podcast publicly, and that most certainly includes any of my experiences in the first 20 years of my life. I find it quite extremely disturbing that Jamie said she experienced the last 8 years with her audience. It's like she's trying to make it seem like I've been closely paying attention to her content the entire time, when in reality, like I've been saying, I've basically ignored Jamie entirely until very recently, when Kimmy actually made it evident that egregious defamation of me had heavy involvement with Jamie being a part of it. This is an extremely relevant detail, since otherwise Jamie can rather trivially attempt to offload a lot of responsibility for harm she caused others onto me completely wrongfully. Neither Jamie nor Kimmy ever made the reality of Jamie's involvement actually evident to me the entire time. Kimmy kept my attention on her instead and never actually made anyone else seem particularly relevant to all the chaos and suffering I was being forced to suffer through until my efforts on this podcast started forcing Kimmy to actually start exposing herself enough that I started to gain clarity despite her clear efforts to prevent me from doing so. So, at least as far as I'm concerned, as much as Jamie must be at fault, Kimmy definitely also is very much largely at fault. Although Jamie definitely is very much at fault for sure, it seems, you can see how Jamie's self-proclaimed attributes demonstrate an exceptionally delusional perception of herself as some lovely goddess, while in reality she's proven herself to be an exceptionally fake, cruel, suicidal, narcissist psychopath that looks down on me so extremely extensively that even 39 releases and over a year into me doing this podcast, she's still going on stream and praising herself as if I'm unworthy of having her, when in reality she'll never be good enough to deserve me, at least as far as I'll ever be concerned. This, to me, demonstrates how blatantly, unapologetically Jamie has been egregiously exploiting and abusing the affection I've shown and intended for Kimmy ever since the beginning, to instead selfishly gain herself, fully consciously and intentionally, entirely to my detriment against my consent. Accordingly, for their knowing and intentional, substantial involvement in defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, coercion, impersonation, identity theft, life insurance fraud, conspiracy to murder, and attempted murder of me, I affirm my intent to take formal legal action, suing and pressing criminal charges against the Twitch streamers Angels Kimmy, iGumdrop, Star Smitten, Pokimane, Lily Pichu, Aryasaki, Jessica, Valkyrie, and NMP LOL, as well as the digital creator Lena Lemon, along with the much lesser known persons Mary Aslan, Dixon Aslan, Kristen Aslan, John Sade, Chloe Jenkin, Jerry Cow, Herman Hum, and Matthew Wu. Again, this list remains subject to potential further additions as any further evidence I may end up gathering proves appropriate.